Good evening, everyone. We are live with our boys Xander Clever. We got Racetrack Astronaut back in the booth. Clever, Brandon Eves, Connor Zellage, and me, myself, and I.
Hello.
Half that was cut out, but
It's been a while since I've been here.
I think it actually worked out good that you left out Ryan with the little mini beef.
Yeah, thanks, man. I was just waiting for my introduction.
Wait, did I miss you? And the four-time champ, Rollison Performance Group driver, Ryan Norberg.
Brian Norberg.
Thank you, Paulie. Guys, we got a great show for everyone here tonight. We have a ton of guests that we're going to get to. In fact, they are lined up in the studio and going to be joining us. If you followed our socials, you know who we've got. We've got a ton of great drivers and team owners and former drivers coming on the show as we continue to cycle the guests on. But, of course, we're super happy to have our main crew of guys on back. A couple of guys here had a busy weekend. A few of us did not. I myself was home this weekend. I know that Braden was as well, but Paulie, Brandon, and Connor all in action in North Carolina this weekend. Paulie, did you get any more club race fights, or were we good?
No, I actually drove really clean. I actually got wrecked this weekend.
Yeah, I had to replace so many parts on this go-kart this weekend. It was insane.
I mean, Connor. It wasn't anyone's fault, but little barriers, a little close to the track.
You really let crews just show up and beat you.
Yeah.
Well, we all went out. Yeah. We all went out on used tires and.
Okay. Always a story.
Brent went new tires when we already had like 3 sessions on our tires. So
I wrecked. There was 2 pre-finals and 2 finals, and I wrecked 3 times. So really fun day of club racing for me.
Ryan, how was your weekend down south?
Didn't do anything really. I went. It was my dad's birthday, so had a little bit of a party one night, and then I actually went golfing today and saw Noah Harmon at the track. I mean, at the course. He's a karter from the Orlando area, and I didn't realize we live like 5 minutes from each other. So we hit a couple balls, and then I took him home. So it was cool, chill week.
Yeah. Okay. A little non go-kart stuff.
With the locals. Took him home first day.
He's like 15, dude.
I'm 15 too.
We're off to a great start tonight, boys. I love it. Let's go over a couple things really quick here. So first of all, we'll start running some of the banners. Some of you guys may have noticed we did start running the winners of regional racing we had down at the bottom of the screen. The SCUSA California Pro Kart Challenge was in action this weekend. Blake Nash and the Nash Motorsports boys did an awesome job to 1K100 Senior. Shout out to Jesus Vasquez Jr. He is here every single stream that we do. In fact, he's already on the stream already. So everyone, big shout out here to Jesus Vasquez Jr. I don't know how many wins he's got. I think he's almost won just about every Cali Pro Kart final because every time we talk about it, he's been winning them. So that was over at Willow Springs. We'll also have the Colorado Karting Tour we're going to bring up a little bit as well. And then we've got a lot to talk about over the weekend from everything that went down outside of karting too, from F1 to INDYCAR. And we haven't talked about it in a while, but Pushback Bumpers 2021 is the 5th year anniversary. So if we talk racecraft, we have to talk about that too. But Cali Pro Kart, Willow Springs. Ryan, you've run a good bit out west. Have you run the Willow Springs kart track too?
Yeah. All those, I like all those like old school tracks. Like the pavement's normally not really that good, and like they're super tight, but they're really fun tracks over there. Like they're very, I don't know, they suit my driving style a lot. So I like going out there and racing those stuff.
Sweet. Well, we're going to kick all these guys out here for just a few moments because we've got to introduce the rest of our people. Connor Zilish has graciously offered to introduce everyone that we've got, so I'll boot everyone down for a minute. Later, Brandon. Later, Braden. Later, Paulie. Later, Ryan. And Connor, let's go ahead. We'll have you call out who we've got with us here tonight.
Alrighty. So first person we got, Jake Drew. He just got off his weekend at ARCA where he really should have won. He crossed the line first, but got a penalty for getting sent, which sucked for him. And then we have Race Liberante, owner of Race Factory. Mike Doty Racing, and Ryan Perry at Ryan Perry Motorsports.
And Ryan, you were over at the Cali Pro Kart race. You had your guys running over there. Talk to me. How was that?
Yeah, it was a pretty busy weekend. It was hard to find some help, so we had to bring guys in from all over the place, really. But we had 19 drivers under our tent, and a bunch of guys got some podiums. One guy got a win, micro. So for the pro kart stuff, it's kind of me and Nick Strasbaugh. We kind of like do a collaboration, and then he comes on for the pro tour. We bring him on to help us out. And so he had a few guys, and then we had a bunch of guys. But combined effort, it was 19 drivers. So, yeah, it was a pretty good weekend. Everybody learned a lot. Everybody had fun. So I would call it a success.
Sick. And you weren't the only guy was busy over the weekend. Everybody in the sport knows how busy running a shop or a team is. Doty, where were you at this weekend? What were you up to?
We're at our local track at OPRP. They had a doubleheader club race on Saturday and Sunday. Pretty busy. We run like 20 drivers, so it's hectic. The only thing there, we don't have to change the gear or anything. We're just on the drivers, trying to get them a little bit better. Hopefully they don't hit anything. But the weather was good, no rain, so can't complain.
And then Race, what were you up to?
All right, I was actually on cart delivery duty this weekend. One of our employees had to call in, so I actually went down to Mooresville for the weekend, delivered a go-kart, picked up some Miami parts down at Kart Sport, and hung out to watch a few finals down at the GoPro Club race. So pretty chill weekend for me, kind of a weekend off.
Yeah, and there's one guy here on the show who absolutely did not have a weekend off. Jake, we didn't really get to introduce you because you were getting all your stuff set up. But first, let's have you talk about it, and then we'll put the video up for everyone to see.
Yeah. Speechless.
Should we go with the video first then to show everyone how it ended?
Yeah. Probably.
So for those of you guys that don't know, obviously, if you follow us through all of our Kart Chaser videos, Jake Drew drives for Ryan under Ryan Perry Motorsports banner, along with Paulie and a handful of others. He also got a huge opportunity this year to run with the Sunrise Ford Group in the ARCA Menards Series West, which is on the NASCAR ladder, and has been kicking butt at every road course race. And while INDYCAR was over at Portland, they had ARCA running as a companion race. Jake ran really good, and like I said, we'll throw his reaction up on the screen here because he led a good bit, got taken out, came back to the lead, and then in classic ARCA fashion, which is the only racing series I know of besides short tracks that still does one-lap shootouts, came down to a one-lap shootout, and you can go ahead and watch. Oh, let's see here. Going with that. So as you can see here, going right on through, final restart. Jake leading the way, drops down, covers off the bottom, and Portland with the massive chicane. It's a little nudge again, a little bit off, and final lap, pedal to the metal, Jake. And unfortunately, they robbed you a little bit this weekend.
I would agree. That just sucks. I mean, there wasn't really much else I could do. They were pretty straightforward on the ruling of if you miss the chicane, you got to stop. But there was no way I was going to stop on the last lap. I don't know. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, no way. I mean, we were all cheering for you. Your team's been running really good, and that would have been pretty big in the points for you with everything this weekend. How big is the gap now till the next Menards Series West race? There's only a handful left, right?
Yeah, we got 3 left. We go to Vegas on the 23rd. Right now, the points, I'm 19 points out now, which is tricky because there are a lot of bonus points, but it's only 1 point per position, so it's pretty tough. I mean, we'll see what we can do. Maybe we'll have to hand some out.
Yeah, have to give a little bit back there. Well, team guys, obviously you got to see it. We're going to dive into a whole lot of other racecraft here throughout the weekend. But since you guys were all working race, I know you were watching that a little bit. You actually have run a good bit of short track racing out west. What's your take on how they pursue that corner cutting stuff? Because Whereas IndyCar will use the timing loops and they did in their racing. NASCAR's kind of got this like standard rule that almost murders a guy if he gets knocked off, that he has to come to a complete stop.
Yeah. So first off, road racing stock cars is extremely hard to begin with, and close, tight racing like that just ends up kind of like that. So it's not that these guys are incapable by any means, because my first thought was Jake just didn't get a good enough restart. But seeing that now, I didn't actually get to watch the race, but looking at that, it's kind of tough. I mean, when you're kind of forced off the track or pushed off the track, and then it kind of falls onto him to do a stop and go right there. I mean, he's not. There's just no coming back from that. You're better off taking whatever penalty they give you for it. But yeah, I don't necessarily love the stop and go that NASCAR's implemented. It makes sense at certain tracks like Charlotte with the Roval, and I think that's kind of where that rule originated. But these tight chicanes on restarts just have never seemed, in my opinion, to work out. I mean, the things that we're going to talk about later tonight, it doesn't work out for the guys that do this for a living and have infinite amount of experience. So how do you expect guys in Jake's shoes, where they're still in a ladder system, or even at the pro level of NASCAR, something that does not stop as quick as a Formula car or a go-kart, to make something like that work?
Yeah. And Ryan, you've gone to bat for Jake countless times, and all your guys. How quickly would you have run right over to the steward you had nearest to you on pit lane if you're Jake's crew chief right there?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I would have been over there for sure. It's one thing if you miss the corner or you miss the braking and you go off on your own, but when you get help off the track, I think they need to really think about changing the rule, because there was nothing he could have done there.
Yeah, I mean, not too much at all. Doty, what do you think? Another former driver coach. You've been up and around motorsports in every way. What's your take?
He was in a lose-lose situation, right? If he didn't get off the bottom, somebody would have got on the inside of him, and he would have been forced off the track regardless. I mean, so you got to get lucky in some incidents, but there was no luck there. I mean, it's just that type of racing, and you're probably better off being third or fourth. First definitely isn't the place to be. I mean, it's not his fault. It's just the way it is. It's not. I mean, the rules got to change, but who knows what the rule has to be.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot more, like Race was alluding to here. We got a lot to talk about on the open wheel side, and we got a lot of go-kart stuff to talk about, which is, of course, what the show is all about. So we'll talk to these guys a little bit more around the horn when we get to segment number 3. We're going to bring our original guys back when we go back from commercial. Again, guys, Casey Happy Hour episode 10, the first of, I guess, many anniversaries that we've got, and many milestones. Again, stick with us here when we come back. We'll bring back the rest of the crew, bring back these guys as well. So if you've got any questions, keep on sending those into YouTube and Facebook. If you have for our original guys, they'll do them in segment 2. And for these guys here, for Race Liberante, Ryan Perry, Mike Doty, and Jake Drew, send those in as well, and we'll continue to answer them throughout the night. Thanks for tuning in so far, guys. We'll see you right after the break.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a team that has won more races, won more championships, and produced more top-level drivers than Rollison Performance Group in the last decade. RPG is most commonly known as the premier driver development program in North America, specifically based on the team's unique approach when it comes to fostering talent. Rather than looking at things on a race-by-race basis, RPG focuses on building season-based plans for each driver, each with a heavy weight towards private training weekends at their home base at Pat's Acres Racing Complex. Each training weekend puts drivers on track with national champions such as Ryan Norberg, Austin Garrison, and Luke Selikin for hundreds of laps. Add that to the meticulous equipment prep done by RPG's team of professional mechanics, and you've got a winning combination. For more information on how to start your driver development journey with RPG, visit RollisonPerformanceGroup.com.
Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAMI and Vortex Rock engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jecco Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com. So again, guys, here a lot to talk about, and we'll bring our regular crew back into the studio. First and foremost, the biggest story out of the weekend comes from the most popular racing series, which is Formula One, and we have already talked about it with these 6 here before. We have not agreed before. I'm not sure if we'll ever agree when it comes to racing incidents because everybody's a little bit different. But let's see it. So Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton. We've got the clips on the screen here. First, we're going to play up at the very start of the race, which is really where this stuff started. You can argue that even then, this battle goes back long before it. But as they go down into the first chicane here, very first lap of the race, Hamilton on the outside of Verstappen. Verstappen runs him all the way out to the edge when they were pretty much nose to nose going down into the corner. But there's a lot of runoff room easily there. Cuts him off, says, all right, I'm on the inside. You're trying to go around the outside, and I'll push you wide. And then we fast forward to later on in the race. Verstappen, bad pit stop, comes out of the pit lane here with Hamilton, who fell back. Verstappen was running P2. He had a 10-second stop. Hamilton there was right after the first pit cycle, which was, I think, probably around like 30. I can't remember exactly, but it was
that's like every race, though. That's literally like every start of every race. Max he angles the car on the grid, like just turns into him as soon as the start goes. So that's like, it's not just this start. It's the last start. It's the last start before that one, and all the other races this season. It's like it's just how he drives. So I mean, you're gonna piss somebody off at some point.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is, like, unless you've driven in a open wheel series that you don't fully understand, is like how insanely impossible it is to pass. So like, when you're in that position where there's like that one opportunity, you have to drive it so hard just to get that one position, because it's like if you don't make it up there, it's not gonna happen, period. And like, for example, like I'm not an F1, so it's not as bad, and obviously we don't have like DRS or anything like that, but you can be 5 to 7 to 8 tenths quicker of the guy in front and sit behind them and run the same lap times as them. So it's for me, it's the aggression comes when you're racing in cars like that, to be honest.
Right. And that's what we talk about, all the time is, we were joking last week, or it was 2 weeks ago, right, about go-karts having air wash and a little bit of understeer now, especially as we get more and more bodywork on the go-karts. But they're nothing to, the F1 cars. And even with Jake racing stock cars now, there is some push, especially when you get on the ovals. There's nothing like when you have, airplanes with wheels and tires that what we get to watch in IndyCar and F1. So, Connor, I haven't gotten to you yet, but before we get over to IndyCar Portland, do you have any more final thoughts to add from what everyone else has been saying?
You're muted.
Solid, Connor.
Hold on. Where's our boy? There he is.
Back. All right. Yeah, I agree with what Braden said about how the tension's rising, and they're going to go for every single chance they can take because the championship's on the line. There's a lot on the line, really. So, I mean, Max kind of did Lewis dirty in the first move with putting him off the track, but he did it the right way. He didn't do it halfway. He completely put him off the track, so there wasn't a crash. And then Lewis kind of left him a little bit of room in the first part of the chicane, and then got stuck on the outside. And Lewis didn't leave him enough room and put him over the sausage curb. So, I mean, Max kind of did it to him first. Lewis did it to him the second time. Call it even. The 3-place penalty wasn't really necessary. So, it is what it is.
Fair enough. And it's a good way to end it here. And I want to move over because obviously drivers, we're not normally in that spot of making penalties, but we are in the spot a lot of times where we get put into really awkward situations like what Braden's talking about, where you're racing in a series and on a track that's really tough to pass. In the go-kart world, we almost end up with the opposite stuff, especially racing with everyone here in single speed where, we go to places like Newcastle or we go to, other tracks that still are pretty high with tow. And on the opposite end, it's so much easier to pass, especially in the midfield of the first few laps that you get frustrated, not because you can't get by a guy, but because a guy that is slower than you still can stuff you, at the start of the race and stuff you back and again and again and again and again. We have almost the opposite effect. But I want to lead into the issue about starts because back on the other side of the world here back at Portland, which we already saw on our screens earlier of how tricky this opening chicane is. Again, this is the first corner. We saw Jake and the ARCA Menards Series West on the final restart. Things get hairy. That was only 16 cars, and all of them had fenders where they could touch. We go over to the NTT Data INDYCAR series, and they had a little bit of a trickier start getting their race underway. And it happens almost every time they go to Portland. I think it's very far and few in between. They have double file restarts. And unfortunately for them, with the tracks they've been going to this year, they've had quite a few double file starts that have almost instantly gone yellow with wrecks, whether it's been ovals or road courses. But going here to Portland, you can see right off the bat, okay, we're fanned out. We're already really high speed, which is another thing with IndyCar. All the starts, they can accelerate super early, whereas NASCAR's got a start box. Even most go-kart races we go to have a single cone or a start box, and they're pretty stringent on that. And granted, the go-kart racing can be a little easier because we typically wave off starts. It's not like a TV format where no matter what, we know we're going green, so the pole sitter may chance it on the off chance that he's going to put it in the officials box, say, look, you need to black flag me and ruin the whole show, But in IndyCar, they don't have any rules on that. They can go whenever. So they're going already a ton faster into the corner. You just saw on the screen there Felix Rosenquist, which is the car in third, pop into, I believe, Scott Dixon he got in the back of, sent both him and Pelot deep into the corner. They missed the turn. More drivers on there get spun around. Oliver Askew, go-karter and IndyCar driver, gets turned. And a bunch got stuck. You can see over here, Elio Castroneves, Romain Grosjean. Kyle Cuthbertson, who's our producer, was talking about how Grosjean got mixed up because he thought they were in meters and not in feet, and the 300, 200, 100 markers going down into the corner. So in any case, it seems like every year that IndyCar comes down to Portland, the start is always super hairy. And I don't know if it's possible. I don't even know if it's something worth considering, but at least, in karting, we have a couple of racetracks where we have a chicane right off the bat, and they'll skip it for the start of the race, and we have it on the opposite end where NASCAR, when they go to the Charlotte Roval for the restarts, they'll put them in the straight line, but that's before the green flag. At the same way with the U.S. Pro Kart Series, when they go to Road America, the last couple corners are, a hairpin section that acts as a chicane. So to get the whole field straight, they skip one of the hairpins. But I mean, if you look at the pylons, especially when you go to the overhead view of what the timing loops are, where they are here, and where those pylons are to make that chicane through the SC1 section, I don't see, like, with the track being long enough, if they have enough of a team of guys, they could maybe try to put that out after the field gets through on the first lap and have all the drivers know that by lap 2 they have to go to the normal course. Because IndyCar does single-file restarts now, so the single-file restarts really weren't that much of an issue, but the double-file ones were. So first, I want to pass it off to everyone because we've had corners like that. And Brandon especially, we're going to kick it off to you, and I know you know where I'm going with this. And unfortunately, you're the only one that has your video up, so this is where we have to go. But this is Scusa Supernats from a couple of years ago on board our very own Brandon Jarsikrak before the pushback bumpers, of course. And it was 180-degree 100 first corner. And, well, you lose about half the field. And there's Braden right up the road from as well. So, Brandon, since it's your video, why don't you take us through first of just honestly what this stuff is like. And as a driver, you're kind of just a passenger by the system. You're not trying to be dirty.
This was back in the day before we had the pushback bumpers, like you said. And I mean, at Supernats back in the day, it was so hard to get through turn 1 without wrecking. This video you can't see of how many people are pushing behind me. So there's probably about 20 cars pushing behind me just as far as I'm pushing.
It's always that.
It's always the guy behind you.
I didn't have brakes.
It's always the guy
It's
behind
serious.
you.
Like, back then in Supernats, I mean, you'd go into the first corner and your rear tires would never be on the ground. So there was no slowing down. It was very difficult, especially when you started in the first 3 rows. I mean, you were just praying that you were going to make it through turn 1. But going back to like all the, like we saw it at like Road America with people cutting the chicane at the top of the hill. And even like you could see it at Portland with the Indy cars and the NASCAR guys. I think the biggest thing is reducing the speed going into the turn 1 when we have a chicane like that. I think if you reduce the speed and start the race a lot further down the straightaway, you're not going to be going as fast into the chicane. So there's not going to be as much chaos and people aren't going to want to cut the chicane as willingly. I think you'd be more likely to make it through there too wide, not necessarily saying it's going to work, but I think going slower through there, you'll be more likely to not have wrecks and people cutting the track.
Yeah, Ryan, Braden, you guys were a part of that. Braden, you were obviously running in the middle, a couple rows up at that Supernats. I mean, going both on that and as a guy who runs an open wheel stuff on similar racetracks to Portland and being in a similar situation, you kind of describe what that stuff's like? I mean, what goes through your mind on a start when you know you've got a terrible corner to start it off?
I don't know. I just always feel like you try to be in the top 10, and if you're not, then you're kind of shit out of luck, to be honest. I don't think pushback bumpers have made the racing any better. I think they made it a lot worse in karting. I think that now you get people that are just side-to-side contact, Euro swerving, and that's way, way more dangerous than just bumping somebody out of the way into the corner. So, and ultimately, I mean, the people are replacing their pushbacks every single time they get pushed in. They're clamping them down. They're putting their bumpers in the sun. Nobody even gets pushbacks when they wreck somebody intentionally. The only time you get a pushback is when there's like some bottle up and then you accidentally clip someone. I never see it actually work the way it's supposed to. So for me, the pushbacks do absolutely nothing but cause problems.
And that was the last thing we were going to talk about. This is the 5th full season that we've got it, dating back to the U.S. Pro Kart Series that debuted the pushback bumpers in 2017. Before we sign off, we'll give everyone kind of closing comments. Ryan, you look like you're ready. What are your thoughts on everything?
So this will probably be the one time I agree with Braden on something. I really don't like them. I think they've really ruined racing. I think that I've spoken on it before, but I think the contact on the start doesn't outweigh the racing being just overall terrible everywhere you go. I think you go anywhere in the world, mid-pack is a block fest because of the drop down. And normally before, if you got desperate and you're coming to the field and somebody's holding you up, you just move them. And that was kind of just like an understanding that everybody had. You have to have respect for the guys that are faster behind you. And if you don't, they're just going to get rid of you. But now it's like you'll pass somebody and they'll just pod you right back. I'm in the center of the corner, drive over the front of you. And it's like, that's just how it is. And so I think it's really ruined racing, the flow of racing. The problem is like everybody wants to compare it to cars. And they're like, oh, in cars, you don't bump. In cars, you don't, but like, there's no real open wheel series that has 40 something drivers every race. And it's not this close. Karting is a contact sport. Like as much as we don't want it to be, it is. And I think taking away the putting in the pushbacks really, really ruined the racing and made it just hard. I mean, it's hard to come to the field. You don't see anybody come from last to first anymore because they don't get the opportunity to. They'll get up to 5th and then have a drop down. And you see so many great races from drivers that started 15th, 16th, and they come and they win the race, and it's like, oh, for sure they had a drop down. So it's like you don't even care. Like if the guy in the back passes you, it's like, okay, he's got a drop down for sure. There's like no way he got to the start, made all these laps without it. And it's like Braden said, we're replacing every time you get a drop down, you replace the brackets, you've got the nose cone in the sun. It's just you don't get it from what they're talking about. If you intentionally take somebody out, like we all know how to take someone out without it dropping in. It's just like if somebody blocks in the middle of the race, you're just stuck behind them because that's when you'll get the drop down, or you'll mess up on the start and somebody will break in front of you too early and then you get a drop down. And it's never ever from like intentionally taking somebody out. It's almost always accidental. I mean, I'm in shifter, like over in Europe, I'm sure. I mean, I've heard so many where somebody just missed the shift in front of them and then drop down. And then it's like, okay, your race is over. Like no reason to drive. So it's, I don't know. I've really not liked it. And I wish they'd go back.
Connor, Paulie, you guys are the closest we've got to the new age. I mean, Connor, by the time you already got into junior, they were starting to use that stuff all over. You don't really know much of what it's like without it. Would you want to see it go away too?
It's kind of hard for me to speak on it because when pushback bumpers came in 2017 and at Supernats when I was in Mini, I think, or Pro Tour when I was in Mini. So I didn't really know what the racing was like prior to it in the upper ranks of senior and shifter. So I can't really speak much on it. In my time being, I kind of see what Braden's coming from with it's gone from front to back contact to side contact, and it is what it is. And I mean, that's racing, and people are going to find a way to get by no matter what. And yeah, I mean, people know how to use their bumper without pushing it in, and that's kind of just, it's going to happen like that. And I mean, it's kind of it's a 50-50. Sometimes it goes your way and sometimes it doesn't. And when it goes your way, you're happy with it. And when it doesn't go your way, you're unhappy with it. So it's hard to speak on it. I wouldn't really care if it went away. I wouldn't really care if it stays, but it's a 50-50 kind of thing.
Jake, Paulie, Any other thoughts from you boys?
I agree on what everyone has been saying so far. I feel like we can start eliminating them, especially like in SCUSA. They have like all the cameras everywhere to like go over something, and I feel like if you intentionally take someone out and it's like really obvious, you're gonna get a penalty for it anyways. So it's like, well, what's the point of the drop downs if you have the cameras, or what's the point of enforcing the penalty if they have a drop down? Because I know like I might have intentionally wrecked a few people a few times, just a few, but and I've never had a drop down from it, knock on wood so far, but then like at Newcastle, it wasn't like I just got drilled from the rear straight into the guy in front of me, like nothing really I can do, and I got a drop down from it. So I don't know. I feel like some of the stuff it's not fair, but then sometimes, like Connor said, it works out for you, and then you're sitting in fourth, and the guy in front of you's got to drop down, or you win Super Nats because of it. But I don't know. In my opinion, I don't think it really changed the racing. Like I don't really think it bettered it, but I don't know.
Well, Jake, we'll let you be the last one to sign us off before we say goodbye and bring the team guys on to talk a little bit different. Any other closing thoughts you got on it all? I mean, you've been around. What's your kill shot percentage in terms of taking guys out? Are you clean without any pushbacks too?
No, I've gotten plenty of pushbacks, mistakes, or just flat out wrecking a guy. But I mean, I wish we could get rid of them, because I mean, definitely to me, the racing gets super frustrating when you got a guy in front of you just white lining the whole track, and you have to worry about your nose and not getting a drop down, and you try not to ruin your race, but at the same time, it's getting ruined by somebody that's blocking you, and I kind of get frustrated by that. And I wish we could see them go away and just kind of get some of that flow back and just more raw racing, I feel like.
I'm gonna add one more thing to what I said. For the people that do get a bumper penalty, once their bumper is in, one, they get really upset because their bumper is in, and two, they know the race is over, so they don't really care what they do. So they just start taking everyone else out for fun. And I've done it before too. I mean, I'm victim to it. Once my bumper goes in, I don't really care what happens after that. So it's kind of it's a demoting feeling when your bumper goes in like the middle of a race. It's like, well, this race is over. And most of the time it's not because I intentionally took someone out. It's they brake checked me. There was a bottle up in front of me. It's never really on purpose. So it's difficult.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, we've got a lot more to talk about with it, and don't get me wrong, viewers, well, these guys definitely have been racing for a good bit. All of our team guys have been racing for almost double some of them, and they've seen the decades of racing through all the way out. So we're going to get a bit of a history lesson on racecraft when we come back from the break. Want to wish a goodbye and a thank you here to our original crew, of course, and the likes of the Shoe Jake Drew joining us. We'll hopefully have him on for a bunch more episodes. A big thank you to all you guys for tuning in so far. Stick with us when we come back. It's time to let the guys just a little bit more hair on their chest talk about more stuff that we've got going on and their thoughts on what it's like not only as a driver in the situations with pushbacks and without, but what they have to do as a coach, and more stuff from the team owner's perspective, because we've got a bunch of those guys in here tonight. So again, stick with us, guys. After the commercial break, Ryan Perry, Mike Doty, Brandon Jarskro's going to stay on with us as he's got his own budding team beginning to start. And of course, Race Liberante will join back with us as well.
I'm Billy Vincent, owner of MPG Motorsports. What we do at MPG is we try to keep it a nice, fun family atmosphere, try to combine sort of the bigger things and of the bigger teams and the professionalism down with sort of some of the fun, sort of family-oriented atmosphere. We try to not only develop drivers, but also the parents and the families for just in knowledge in general in motorsports. It all starts in karting. What we try to do is try to help the drivers, the moms, the dads understand the sport of motorsports in general, not just karting, but what it takes to get all the way up through. Whether you end up wanting to be a driver or a mechanic or an engineer, we can help you with that, and that's what we're here for. If you're interested in joining us at MPG, our home base is at Whiteland Raceway Park in Indianapolis, and you can contact us at info@willpowerkart.com, and one of our great people will reach out to you, and we'll try to put the best program together.
KC Happy Hour is presented by Precision Performance Karting. PPK is the exclusive South Florida dealer for Coyote Motorsports kart racing chassis and Coyote's newest distributor. However, owner John Seglem and Coyote Motorsports' relationship spans across numerous decades in the sport, meaning that you've got years of winning expertise at your service. PPK offers trackside support at all of the CKNA South Division events, the CKNA Majors, such as the Spring Nationals and the Grand Nationals, the Sunshine State Karting Challenge, and a number of club races in the Southeast. PPK also has an impressive driver roster at these events, racking up multiple wins and podiums in 2021 with longtime Coyote Motorsports driver Chris Carroll and KC Happy Hour's own Paulie Massimino and Brandon Jarsacrack. If you're looking to get on the same race-winning equipment as these drivers, from the Coyote Motorsports chassis to the Odenthal motor mounts and Greyhound racing seats, Precision Performance Karting has you covered. Check out Precision Performance Karting on Facebook and Instagram, or email them at ppkartingfl@gmail.com.
All right, guys, welcome back here to KC Happy Hour. And Race, your girlfriend is obviously here on the comment section, and I think she put a pretty good one here, talking about how the race team owners may have more hair on their chest, but a little less on their heads compared to the kids we had before. So I just wanted to hear that on and throw that up and say shout out to Alexis for tuning in. But, again, we covered a lot there from the driver's perspective with the pushbacks and without it. And Race, Mike, Ryan, we'll let you guys say your bit a little bit as well of the racing you grew up with and some of the changes you've seen, over the years. Mike, you've had a long career in karting. Not everyone knows even how much you've had just racing in general, I think, for some of the newcomers to the sport. So talk to us a little your background and how it was when you grew up, what it's changed, and where you're at now of what you tell kids to do and what not to do.
I started in 85. So I got my first start. I started on dirt. We had reed and rotary. There really wasn't any rules.
We lost him again. Oh my gosh! Every time we get Mike going, we lose him. And he was just about to get.
I just wanted to hear what he has his driver do and not do.
Yeah, I was interested for that one too.
Send it. Fucking send it.
Well, Ryan, here, we races on the show, so we'll give you first honors to go next up, man. You've been around the sport for a long time too. What are your thoughts on everything?
I think there's really no point to look at it going away because I don't see the CIK changing how they've done it. But over my years in the sport, I felt like it was a lot better when you have more exposed front bumpers and fully exposed rear bumpers where the tires are exposed. You have to be a lot smarter with the racing, and you'd pay the price if you didn't use your head, and you'd be on your lid. So I think when the full width rear bumpers came out, that's when everything started to go south with the racing, and then it was just kind of a big wreck fest. The starts were a disaster. My opinion on the pushback, since they've gone to the full width rear bumper, they're not going to move backwards, CIK. They're going to just keep moving forward with whatever they do. So they came out with the pushback bumper to kind of compensate for everybody using the full width rear bumper to take everybody out. I think it's okay in my opinion. I would prefer just going back to non-pushbacks and exposed rear tires, but that's never going to happen. What we tell our guys to do is just try to not leave too big of a gap with the guy in front of you, because most of the time the bumper gets pushed in when you have the gap and then somebody's pushing you from behind and you make an abrupt contact with the person in front of you. But if you're already like lightly against their bumper, there's a lot lower risk of the bumper getting pushed in.
And Mike, about same thing for you, right? I mean, you grew up, you said first race back in 88. We lost you for a second, but, talking, I mean, back then, right, you've got, you still got like the milk carton nose cones and then just two side pods and a low loop bumper, right?
Yeah, you knew to lay off people. I mean, if you went in too hard, you were just going to end up on your lid. The rear bumper is probably the worst thing in karting. When you watch these guys go into the turn, if you're in the first 2 or 3 rows, the guys have their wheels completely cocked because they can't steer the car because people are pushing them so much into the turn. If you didn't have the full bumper, you wouldn't have that. I think maybe in the little kid class, they should have the pushbacks and the rear bumpers because of the speed and the perception of distance is off. If you're in a pro class, you shouldn't have rear bumpers around your cart because you're in a pro class. So you should be able to handle it. That's my feeling on it. The rear bumper's the worst. I did notice when I went over Europe when the pushbacks first came out, the starts were a lot cleaner. The people were making it through. And that was the biggest issue. Everybody was complaining about the starts. But the problem I have with the pushback is it creates lazy officiating. I've seen somebody on the comments put it on there, and I've always been saying it. They don't even pay attention on the track. They just have a guy walking up and down going, "Oh, you get a penalty," and they don't even know why you got a penalty. Somebody could have spun out in front of you pulling in. Next thing you know, your bumper dropped. It's your fault. You pulled out of the pit. Somebody popped the chain and you hit them from behind. Then your bumper's dropped. You got a penalty. I just think it's for lazy officiating, and I don't like it at all. No.
Race, you're a hardcore racing guy. I'm sure your answer is just about the same as Mike. Rip all the bodywork off, let them go at it.
Yeah, it's not far from that. I was still pretty young when they came out with the full width rear bumpers. You talk about us being old guys. I'm still a little young, so don't put me up there with Mike.
All right,
I wasn't even around in the 80s. Yeah, so I remember that transition. It was my second year in junior when they made it a rule that, the CIK made it a rule you had to run the full width plastic rear bumpers. And, what I think it really just ruined out of racing, we were taught at a young age respect. There were certain racers that you had respect for on the track, and there were other ones that obviously if you had a problem with, there was a way to remediate that problem. There wasn't as many penalties. There wasn't the pushbacks, like you said, and the metal rear bumpers, people laid off on the start because you either end up on top of somebody or completely just going over them. So I agree with these two gentlemen about the pushbacks just being the solution to the problem that they created trying to solve another problem. I did like when the tires were a little more exposed, and I thought the racing was better and cleaner because, like the pro driver said earlier that you have on here, they now somebody can just white line the whole racetrack and there's not much you can do. Now as a team owner and a team manager, I'm setting my nose cones out in the sun for 2 hours before we put them on the grid to soften them up as much as possible. And it's the same thing we're all forced to do. You got one little nick or hole in your bumper, now you got to replace it. So as much as, I understand why the CIK went the way they did, I think it's just, it's poor officiating now or lazy officials. Now they don't have to do their job quite as much because it's a cut and dry black and white penalty. But from a driver standpoint, there's a lack of respect on the racetrack nowadays, I feel like. And, it's not promoting hard, good racing anymore. I just remember watching races in 05, 06, in that kind of area where the racing was just badass because, the guy in front and behind knew what they had to do to not make that mistake to either end up on their lid or out of the race.
Yeah, it was a lot more exposed. Brandon, you got to run, what was it, probably you were in cadet when the full rear bumpers came in?
Yeah, I think I was my last year cadet that the full rear width bumper came in, and I agree with what all these guys said. I think if we take the full rear width bumper away and go back to the no drop down, I think kids would learn very quick what to do and what not to do, because I know from experience, you'd make one mistake and you'd never do that again with pushing people into the corner the wrong way. But I think going to the pushback bumper thing, it definitely helped the starts because you don't see half the field getting wiped out like we used to see at Supernats all the time. Sometimes we still do see that, but it definitely made the racecraft, like during the race, I think awful because, like we were saying earlier in the show, if you're coming from the back and you get to like 15th place, someone can ruin your run all the way to the front just by blocking just 2-3 corners, but you can't do anything about it because if you move them, then you get a pushback bumper penalty and you ruin your entire race. But I definitely think it took away the racecraft part of it. You don't have to be quite as like savvy with your moves anymore, and it's way different. I don't like it as much.
Right. And I think, it's something that, like Mike was saying, I think Mike brought a really good point about it. Like put that stuff in, because what it ultimately came in, and right, like Ryan's saying too, we're not going to go backwards on safety, right? The CIK brought that stuff in because the guys were flipping over too much. You're having a lot more broken collarbones. We go to races now and the amount of flips we have are far and few in between. Whereas you go back to even before when the rear width bumpers came out, it was probably every couple sessions that guys were flipping, and it wasn't an automatic red flag back then because the flips were so common that the flips would happen. There was a lot more guys, not necessarily always getting hurt, but at least going over, and so that was the argument too, right? That the pushbacks were going to save everybody money. We were going to have, less radiators torn off on the left-hand side, less pipes broken off, less, stuff broken because you get thrown into the air. But now, like Race made a good point, again, that's the biggest thing that they come with. almost instantly you're buying new bumper after new bumper after new bumper, for the front end, because for the viewers watching at home that don't run with pushback bumpers, it's going to allow the bumper to soften up, like he's saying. That's why they're trying to put it in the heat, because the bumper takes more of the force before it actually drops on down. We've actually got a little picture of what the system is. Instead now we're buying $250 bumpers all the time. So the argument can't really be said that we're saving too much money. And then like Brandon's saying, you learn pretty quickly. So the racecraft changes. And now, even with Ryan's point earlier, guys are throwing it in and side podding people a whole lot more. We're getting a lot more tire to tire contact. So that stuff's run its course. I've always said that I think the biggest thing that we keep running into at big races at everywhere, it's the same issue that even on the 4-stroke side, the CKNA Grand Nationals are going to have to deal with. And I really hope Greg Jasperson and those guys, have learned from where they're at last year, because they got a lot of feedback last year where they were at with that event. And Brandon, you raced it. There's just too many go-karts on the track for these starts to be safe. The CIK rule at 34, I think, is fine. I think when we go over that is when we get into trouble. And we've even had it at a number of K100 races this year. We have 40, 50, 60 guys, and you're loaded up even in 30th, and there's no chance you could penalize it. But like what Paulie was saying with cameras, we've got enough cameras around the racetrack in most of these series. It's not expensive to get the system. $1,500 probably would get you the first camera, at least just pointed at the start. And then it's about $500 to $700 for certain systems. It'd be a whole lot more, and it scales. But throwing out the numbers, when I've looked into it, it's not a ton of money, and that's when you own it, right? And so if you have a camera system, let's say you've got only 30 or only 32 go-karts, and you say, all right, if we look and we see there's a wreck, or we see there was too much shoving, and we go back to the last guy that has a gap from his rear bumper, and he's like 5th in a line of go-karts that are all jacked up, then you can give him a 3-second penalty, because it's a lot easier to look for and there's not too many of them. And then that takes away the argument of it making the starts cleaner, because, the whole argument is, the starts got cleaned up. Now we've kind of figured that out. They aren't really that much cleaner anymore. We're still getting guys jacking each other up going into the corner. But we've got the technology and other ways to do it. And, I think the first thing we run into is the number of go-karts on the racetrack, because, like Ryan's saying, you got to tell guys to be a certain way just to survive the start, not even from getting wrecked, because you don't get a pushback anymore. It's just different.
Best advice you can give anybody for not to get a drop down is just be in the lead.
Absolutely.
That's the advice my coach always gives me. Just lead.
Yeah. Just go out front.
Just be faster.
Pretty simple.
Yeah. You don't get it hurt that way. You're not going over anyone if they've got a looper bumper either, if you're out in front. We did have a couple questions too, because again, you guys are high-profile teams. Race on the up, but I would argue definitely a high-profile operation now. And of course, Mike and Ryan, you guys have been having teams for a long while. This was from a parent that actually texted me right before he went live, and he wanted to know both kind of what expectations or benefits people can anticipate of starting to run with a bigger operation, like some parents, as you guys know, and Brandon, now run at the local level, expect you to wave a magic wand and make their kid faster, first weekend. That's a far and few case and not realistic. But they want to know, what does the program look like? And a secondary question they had as well is, are there certain parents you want or don't want, or certain drivers you want or don't want in terms of your tent environment? So I'll pass it off to you, Mike.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or race. Yeah, certain guys you don't want.
Mike can go, please.
Mike can go. Mike, would you like to go off?
You go first.
I mean, if you don't want to, whoever wants to.
I'll go first. So which one you want me to start with first?
Let's start with what a team environment looks like here under Mike Cody Race.
Oh shit!
A lot of tissues, a lot of crying. No. Brandon says I'm too soft. Brandon says I'm too soft now.
Because you made him cry
over the years. No, he doesn't make anyone cry anymore. It's not fun.
I think the biggest when you're going with the bigger teams, everyone thinks that you're doing 100 different things, right? And that's not true. You're trying to keep it simple for the driver. The people nowadays, their skill level is not very high. So if you're changing the cart around every session, then they're not going to get used to it. They can't adapt fast enough. And that's their biggest thing, right? You'll have somebody be good for one session, somebody under your tent. They'll be like first or second. Well, the next session, you don't change anything. They're 20th and 30th. And they want to know what happened. Nothing happened. The track changed. The line changed. They didn't adapt fast enough. So that's what we're there for, to try to tell them how to adapt, when to turn in. And then they're going to share the data with the other kids under your tent that are faster. And that's really going to help them, because sometimes if they're watching their video, they might not get it. If they're watching somebody else's video, they might be able to get it a lot easier for them. So that's what we try to like preach when somebody comes over, that we don't need to change an axle every session. We don't need to always go up 5 teeth. Someone goes, oh, I want to go up 5 teeth. I'm like, is that going to help you hit an apex? No. Then why are we doing that? Like, we got to hit apexes. Missing apexes by 5 foot here, 8 foot there. You keep dropping wheels, but you want to change a gear? That ain't going to help you. Well, maybe we should change the tire pressure. Again, that ain't going to help you. You got to work on yourself. Don't worry about everybody else. I try to be as straightforward as possible. I tiptoe around it a little bit until I get to the end of the day. Until the end of the day, when I'm hearing it for the 5th time, then I have to be a little bit more abrasive with them. So I think that's the benefits on that, with that type of stuff. What else was the other stuff?
Well, let's see. We'll give these guys the other stuff. The other stuff will be who you want driver wise and parent wise under the tent, and who you don't want under the tent. And that's going to be a really fun one we'll get to at the end.
That'll be good.
That'll be good. So, Ryan, you've been doing this a while as well. I mean, pretty similar stuff, right? A lot of it's just talking guys off the ledge and it's not super complicated. Just go out and drive the go-kart.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, like Mike said, you just need to make sure they're hitting the lines. If you're missing the apexes by a few feet, there's no point to change anything on the chassis. But the biggest thing with the team environment is I think a lot of the top teams, they have a lot of good people, within the team that have a vast amount of experience. So that's kind of like with us, we have a lot of our mechanics, or, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them have been at the top level as a driver. So that helps, right? You have a lot of different knowledge, people that have all raced, and then other people, that we have that maybe didn't have a ton of racing experience, have been in a sport for, say, 20, 30, 40 years. So, and then just different people. We have like a lot of different drivers, so you know that you're not going to get like too far out in left field. I think a lot of people, if they're running on their own, maybe they're thinking they're lost, but at the end maybe they're not. So that's the difference. I think just knowing that you're not too far off and getting too far out of the window.
Right. Race. What could you add on there more?
Yeah, I mean that. These guys obviously know how to win races and championships with their teams, and to answer that first question, I think that the best thing you can get from going with a team, especially if you're going from a club level or regional level to a national program, would be data. I mean, for us, it's data. We have a good, at least one solid driver that is usually a team or factory driver of ours at each race of these nationals, and we utilize their data and their setup knowledge and what we're doing on that go-kart to kind of mimic to the drivers that we're really just working on the driving with. So my philosophy is, let's make sure we have good power. Let's make sure the chassis setup's right. So that way, all we have to really focus on is the driver. So as long as what I usually am doing, or under our tent at least, is making those changes based on what our factory driver at the time or team driver at the time is doing to acclimate to the track, and we continue to focus on the driving and the data with each of the up and coming drivers that we have on the team in development.
Yeah, that's good too. And again, Mike and Ryan, they've got the same setup as well, everyone, where they've got drivers they've continued to work on. You get some guys that are farther along in the development process where you're not having to tell them to hit an apex every single time. And that can be the guy that you can do those experimental changes with. And then while you're working on one kid hit the apex, you've already kind of got the winning setup there by having another guy kind of halfway down the way towards getting to a winning go-kart. So it accelerates it. And then Ryan's point too, right? You've got a lot of experience under the tent. Now, that being said, with everything, let's dive into the fun question of it all, right? Who do we want under with our team? Because, when we go to the go-kart track, as much as we go to win, it should be to enjoy it, because it's a hobby, it's a pastime, and it's a passion and an industry you want to smile when you're around. So, Mike, would you like to lead it off again here? Because you've been doing a great job all night. What are some red flags of drivers or parents? You're like, man, I really don't even know. No matter what check he'd want to write me for me to coach him, do I want to deal with that?
Well, usually with a driver, the first thing is when you're telling them something or explaining, and you can't even finish a sentence, and they're already interrupting you saying, but. They're not listening. Or you explain something to them, and then they're talking about something totally different. They're not soaking it in what you're telling them. And we're just there to try to help them and make them go faster. So we just want a driver that listens and goes and debriefs. They want to come back 10 minutes later and talk about something else, and that's fine. At least I know they retained what I told them or what the data guy told them or the video guy told them. Because sometimes I'll have the video guy come to me and go, somebody's not really listening. I'm trying to explain something to them in turn 3, but they're talking about turn 5. So that means they're not paying attention. They're thinking about something else. If you slow everything down, then everything else will go your way. On the parents, everyone's different, right? So I've been in the sport long enough that everyone is unique, I'll call it. Right? Unique. So I try not to take anybody the wrong way, but you're dealing with their child, right? And they're the one paying the bill. So you're going to hear some weird things sometimes. Sometimes it's going to be outlandish. But the reason they're asking you questions because they don't know, right? It used to kind of irk me a little bit. But when you sit down and you talk to them, they're asking the questions because they honestly don't know. So you have to explain it to them. So I've never heard of a stupid question. Right? I've learned that when I went to school when I was a kid, right? Teacher says, there's no such thing as a stupid question. The only thing that's stupid is when you don't ask a question. So I try to go at it like that. And anytime somebody asks me something, I think like that. And then when you talk to them and they really didn't know, and then everything's okay and ask her. I mean, I never really get too many complaints or anything like that. They're just asking questions. Why are we 30th? Because your kid's a 30th place driver. They don't have that much experience, right? If they keep taking the green, if they can take the checkered flag, good things are going to happen. That's what I tell somebody that goes to a national the first time. Take the green and take the checkered. If you take the checkered and stay on the track every lap, you're going to get good results. You're going to do better than you think. We had a kid at Road America, never came to a national. I think there was like 48 KAs. This kid's running around 28th, 30th. He comes in, I go, how was it out there? He goes, I've never had so much fun in my whole entire life. This is a blast, my first national. Now I have the other kid on the other side of the tent. He's in 6th place and he's pouting, right? Karting is supposed to be fun. You can't win them all. There's a winner and there's a loser. I just try to tell everyone, just do the best you can to get good results and everything else will work out. I mean, if you're pouting, I know I raced. I'm a pouter. I'd be that guy just because I want to win and I'm competitive. But you try to explain to everybody like you can't win every time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Race, you've grown your brand, grown the chassis over the last couple of years from the ground up and spent a good amount of time with especially brand new parents. Obviously Ryan and Mike and Brandon all have guys at the club level, but I'd say at everyone you've probably spent the most time getting brand new people into the sport with Race Factory. What are some stuff you notice with new parents and something you could give them as like advice or like, hey, think of it this way?
Yeah, so I mean, getting anybody new into the sport, it's not an easy sport to get into, and just hit the ground running, especially now that you're seeing, you're talking to your pro guys over here and they're running club races. So, trying to go up against that for your first have at it is extremely hard when those guys have some knowledge. So we've got a setup manual and a curriculum that we put together for anybody that's new getting into karting, because that is our sole focus. Of course, we're there to compete, but at the end of the day, my passion for the sport is getting new people into seats. So having some sort of a curriculum together for them to learn. Next year, we're going to start doing some training camps, not only for the drivers, but also for the parents/mechanics. And just trying to educate people on the basics of karting, what to expect, the right ladder system, even in karting to take. I feel like you see a lot of guys hit nationals way too early in their careers and they either get burnt out or, it just causes problems when they think they're little Johnny's the best at the club race. Why is he not winning the Super Nats? And you got to try and put it in perspective when it's almost too late. So we're trying to build a ladder system and kind of show people which paths to take first, so they can have a successful karting into hopefully cars career eventually. But to comment on what you don't want, we like to have fun, and like everybody's saying here, if we all do this because we love it, because we manage to have fun at it, and I'm sure anybody that comes by the Race Factory tent knows after hours we have a damn good time. And if there's parents that aren't down for that, then they're just not cut out for us.
Yeah, fair enough. Ryan, you got any no-goes under your tent or anything you tell a parent like, hey, don't come with me if you're this, or come with me to learn that?
Yeah, we just don't want any animosity between the parents. That's the biggest thing. Like, everybody has to get along in the tent. That can get pretty interesting if it doesn't happen smooth like that, but we're willing to work with anyone that wants to get better and listen, like Mike said. And we have all different levels of drivers, and we work with different drivers at the local level and regional level, and then we have a different group that goes to the national level, and we have some of those drivers are trying to transition into national level racing, and we just try to, let them know it's not like, try not to look at your progress race by race. Like, let's look at your progression from the beginning of the season to the end, and then evaluate how you did at that point. Because a lot of people just get frustrated, and the last thing that you want to do is have people get burnt out and get out of the sport. So it's just about helping them get better and having realistic expectations.
Yeah, no kidding. Brandon, speaking of realistic expectations, we were talking just before you came on the air. You had a kid this weekend at a GoPro club race. He had been running for 6 months, right? You dropped his times about 0.9 of a second with you and having Paulie coach him. Deal with new parents where, has it been more or anything different than what you thought of now that you've basically got a full team program at GoPro club races?
I mean, I've kind of experienced it for a little while working with Mike for so long and working with all different kinds of parents. But I feel like it's really hard, like along with what Race said, running the club races at GoPro, it's so hard to teach new people because you're almost jumping in against like all the pros. Like you have Paulie there, you have Connor running, you have all like the top couple guys running at a club level. So a lot of people have like a higher expectation, and you just got to work on them one at a time and try and get them better. Like, for example, this kid this weekend, we improved his time by 8, 9 tenths, and he had the same lap times as the leaders, and he was going really fast, but his racecraft was not very good. So now we have to go back for the next club race and work on his racecraft. So it's just taking one step at a time and working on him. And along with like what Mike said, with the parents, a lot of them just don't really understand it. But if you take the time to explain what they want to know with the question they're asking, then they don't become like annoying or anything like that. Then they ask you more intelligent questions, and they learn and help you all at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It's a good way to put it. Well, let's see here. First of all, Mike, you're already getting called out, man. You got no love from Brian, from Ray. Everyone, look at that. Brian saying that he said you said he had a stupid question yesterday. Ray says you were polishing up. Actually, I think that's a good one. That's almost like a compliment that it's a nicer edited version. You're polished for the show, so we'll take it. But
yeah. Well, I was thinking too, right? The progression thing with a lot of the drivers is, say, like when you get them up in just around the top 10, then the next year they start running up front, but now they're sitting in the infield most of the time, crashed. And then the parents will go, "What the heck's going on?" I'm like, "They just don't know what they're doing up there." They go, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, racing up front is different than racing in the back or in the middle." So what happens is you get them up front, and then they don't know how to do anything when they get up front. So on the progression thing, that's like the thing that's like the biggest thing. So, and then it takes a whole nother year to get him to stay up front, and goes from there. Brandon doesn't tell you. I got to yell at him all the time.
Yeah, it's 100% true. He yells at me every weekend.
I have another parent come to me and they go, "Why aren't you yelling at my kid?" I'm like, "Because your kid doesn't know any better. He does." Doing it long enough. They go, "Okay, that makes sense." Because for the new kids, we want them to have fun. We don't want Brandon to have fun, right? No. He's really at the end, right? He had all his fun. No, it's no more fun for him.
Right. Well, and I'd say I'd want to add one thing too. One thing I've always told parents whenever we're getting them in, or I run into them a lot, and for the little bit of coaching that I've done going back, it's like it's almost like I don't know, maybe like a job curve or anything with life, right? It's the progression curve. It's not just a nice and easy diagonal line up. Like you have so many times with kids or even with adults where like they stagnate for however long, and then something randomly clicks, and then the kid goes from like 20th to 5th, or for instead of losing every battle, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, where did this come from? He just outraced, 5 guys that run up front. So I'd say the last thing for the parent, going back to that question of what to expect going in, it's not a magic thing. I think all these guys here, talked, and you can hear from the transparency and everything they're saying that like, there's no, it's not like it's a secret perfect sauce that's going to make your kid good, but absolutely the tools are there, and it's not going to be a weekend 1 we finish 10th, weekend 2 we finish 5th, weekend 3 we win. there's going to be moments where it's like you're banging your head against the wall because it's not clicking, and then randomly it does, and then all of a sudden you jump up again. And sometimes you get in a hot streak, and even when, like what Mike's saying too, you know, most of the time drivers, kids or adults, have to lose about probably 5 races they should have won or more, and then finally start winning. I mean, you know, like Mike's saying, he's been yelling at Brandon. Brandon's been, you know, winning and then not winning recently, you know, so he gets yelled at a little bit more. But
you know what the main question is by most of the parents? And they always say, like, when they start racing, how do we get better racecraft? There's only one answer: race. That's the only way you get better racecraft. I can only tell you what to do, or Ryan's going to say, hey, you got to do it this way. But when you've got your helmet on and you're on the track, it's a totally different thing. So the only way you get better racecraft is race. And that's any race. It could be a club race or anything. You know, some people don't go out because they might not think the competition is good enough. But anytime you're out there wheeling it, you're practicing. You're going to get better racecraft.
A lot of these people just go to the club races and they get to a point to where they're just cracking the top 5 and they just keep doing the same thing, and they wonder why they can't win at the club level. It's because you're not racing at the regional level or the national level. If you want to take that next step, you have to race against people that are better than you, or you're going to kind of stall out.
Yeah, that's another thing too, and that's a good point with what Race has got going on. And all 3 of these guys, as we start to wrap up, actually all 4 really, with everything with Brandon's got going on, just transitioning from full-time driver to part-time driver, full-time team owner, coach, everything in between. You know, that's these guys can absolutely help you with the progression too. You know, Ryan's based over in out west. He can teach you everything out there, where to go, races from out west. So for anyone here watching on the show, if you've got your kid, you can check it out. We'll make sure all these guys' pages are always tagged, and you can send them a message. And every bit of the info here, you know, you can tell this is all genuine. These guys are awesome, and a huge thank you to everyone for coming on. We did get another question here right as we're starting to get towards the end, though. This is from Paul Hart Jr. So here's a good one. When you have a kid that isn't listening to the coaching, what do you do to get past that plateau, right? And so that's something true too. You know, when the kid's not paying attention, I don't know. That's what kind of answer can we get, Paulie? I'm not.
Do you want the honest answer, or
yeah, go for it, Race. Honest answer. Come on.
Oof, man, the honest answer to that is we may have to pick up a different sport. But no, I'm just kidding. You know, especially children, man, they have, you know, the thing I tell all the parents, and I deal with a lot of mini guys lately and their parents, of course. The one thing I can never say to those guys is, you know, one, trying to find a way that can be interactive with them. I have one kid that will not listen to me unless I throw him the football and we play catch together, and I ask him a question and I won't throw it back until he answers it. And we have a conversation that way, and that's how he's engaged. So finding a way to get your kid engaged is extremely important. And on top of that, I also have a few parents that I've worked with, and you know, some of the kids just come and figure it out at a different age. Some mature mentally more than others. Some it just clicks one day. You know, they may have one good day and never look back. So knowing when your kid's going to click, or if he's clicked yet, and working through that in a way that they can learn is, my opinion, most important. And if it never happens, then yeah, maybe pick up a ball and see if you can catch it. I don't know.
Brian, Mike?
He took my notebook. That's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. Usually the maturity level, when they're young like that, they're going to get stagnant, and you might not think they're listening, but you got to let them have fun when they're young. If they're not having fun when they're young, there's no sense of telling them. I mean, they're only going to do as good as they're going to do, and then all of a sudden something's going to click, and they're going to do a lot better.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're going to kind of progress at their own speed. I think it's good to have, you know, more than one person trying to get through to the kids. But I think at the end of the day, some kids, they don't get it until they're 13, 14. Others get it when they're 7. Just all depends on where they are.
Yeah. Here's another good one too, kind of building off that, right? So this was from Philip Niemkowicz. So he said, you know, how do you deal with a kid that they say they're listening, but they won't actually make the change on track? Some, you know, that happens a lot too, right? You know, when they come in, you're like, all right, I'm going to go and hit this apex, and then they don't, or they think they're making the change, but don't. How do you kind of break through?
Just keep doing the same thing. Keep telling them over and over, go over a video, point it out every single session. And eventually, it might take a few races, it might take 6 months, but I think for the most part, most of them eventually start to listen. It's just a matter of when.
I always think putting WD-40 on the brake rotor, that usually works really good. Over that no, I mean, it's just when they're not listening, maybe it's just that they're trying to listen. It's just maybe their skill level just isn't there. And that's a lot of the times. And, as us, we're coaching kids, we'll start to get upset a little bit because we're telling them over and over again. But then you got to reel it back in. It's just maybe their skill level just isn't there yet. Not saying they'll never be able to do it. It's just at that moment, it's not there.
Yeah, that's a good realistic answer. Grace?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. If maybe you got to switch up your coaching method, how you work or talk to a certain kid. I personally really enjoy working on lines and stuff like that on track walks. I really can engage and explain things a little bit better. So maybe it's just every kid's a little different. Some kids can look at the computer and see exactly what you're talking about. Other kids literally don't know what corner the line on the graph even is. So just knowing the experience and really just being able to almost be their friend, let them talk to you, because most of the time they're just telling you they know because they and they really don't have it figured out, and it's just because they may be afraid to ask that question or think there is a stupid question or whatever it may be. So finding the pace that individual driver's going to learn at, I think, is how you solve that problem.
That's pretty good. I think, yeah. All right. That'll clear us out with questions we got. Just checking last thing there. But I think that's a good way to end it too, right? You got to find ways.
Let me give you some advice for the young drivers out there.
Oh,
so when they're coming to pit with our teams and their parents are taking the time and effort and they're paying us, me, Ryan, Race, Brandon, to coach their kids, and you're doing a data session or watching video and you can't find the kid because he's either on his phone in the corner someplace or he's out running around, he should always be there watching other people's videos and watching other people's data. And we shouldn't have to go look for you. And that's probably the biggest thing. When everybody else is putting the effort in, the driver needs to put the effort in. And a lot of the kids these days that come through a lot of these teams here, very minimum put the effort in. And the ones the ones that put the effort in, you're seeing them on Kart Chaser, you're seeing them in magazines. These are the kids doing this with their hands and holding checkered flags. And I try to explain that to the kids, but a lot of them, it doesn't get through to them. You still can't find them. Like, they're not coming for track walks in the morning. They're not doing anything like that. They're putting in very minimal effort.
Keep going, Mike. Come on, preach, Mike, preach.
Like, it gets you upset, right? Because when you talk to the driver, oh, my motor isn't any good. No, I don't think it's the motor. You're putting in very minimal effort. There's all of them are out there, and I'm sure everyone here has worked with one or two kids or have a kid that races with them. And I try to get on. I'm like, why aren't you watching this guy's video? Why are we looking for
kids
it?
Are adults. There's 19, 20-year-olds that don't understand it either. It's at the end of the day, you can pay any of us to work on your stuff and teach you what to do. You can pay any of the guys that were just on this show and they're on here regularly to coach you. But at the end of the day, the work ethic and the attention that you're going to put into your own racing is going to be superior to anything we could ever do or say on your go-kart. Is what it is, right?
So these drivers that you have on here weekly, like Brandon and Norberg and Eves and Paulie, I don't know if I'm forgetting who else, Connor.
Flipper.
I've worked with some of those drivers. Those guys are putting the effort in. They're looking at their own data before you're even looking at it. They might say, hey, that isn't right. So when these guys are on here, and who's ever watching this, parents or kids, that's the difference. That's why these are the guys on here winning races.
Yeah, the people really should be, the kids should be in there watching other people's video sessions, because you can learn when, the data guy or the video guy or team manager or whoever's going over it are pointing out little differences on what you can do, not just like driving lines, but like racecraft as well, right? Yep. Everybody can learn from watching those sessions, even if it's not them.
Yeah. That's one way, right? If you want to improve your racecraft, going back to Mike's question, really it's like it's almost all retrospective. Oh, you should have done that. Well, you can probably skip a few of those steps on the way if you watch everyone else make those mistakes first, and then you're like, all right, I'm running fifth right now, but I just saw my teammate choke a win because he didn't block on the last lap, But I saw him do that, so when I get up there, I won't do that. So. That's huge too for any parents and kids watching along, is staying around the tent. I mean, You want to have fun at the go-kart track. There's absolutely time to have fun, but these guys they know what they're talking about, and you can learn a lot just by hanging around. And that's why we're trying to do more and more of these all access videos. You can see the one we did with Ryan this week that, there were multiple drivers crowded around. There was only one video up on the screen for a number of different times going over it, because it's like, well, let me see what he's doing, and that's a huge benefit that is kind of under, probably up until now, maybe undervalued or underspoken about of being with the team, is you see the coding done to other people, and half of that can apply to you too, even if it wasn't at you that specific session.
Yeah, or the best is the kids in the middle of the day go watch the Jarsa Cracks and the Norberts drive around the track. I mean,
Yep.
That's probably your best. That's free.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You don't have to tell anybody, that's free. You can go watch that. I
Yeah.
try to tell all the kids we should be up there watching those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the biggest misconception any of these, parents or kids or whatever, you go, I want to go run with Mike, or I want to go run with Ryan, and they go and do that, and they don't find like immediate success. It just comes down to time, work ethic, and everything that you can supply yourself. Those guys are just giving you. Our job is to give you the right tools to go do the job. It's up to you to have the dedication and focus and everything to go actually get that job done.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, let's see. Any other closing comments here, guys? Anything else we got going on? Because we've got everyone on here. I think we've got a lot of comments here. Here's another parent just saying, going back to it, where kids will be wanting new tires, another valve job. I'm sure hopefully we've affected a few more saying, you know what, they can work a little bit harder. But yeah, before we let you guys go, anything else?
That should be it.
Sweet.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
I'll see most of you guys in October, I believe.
that's right.
be
That's
there.
right.
See all you guys in Vegas, no matter what, right? See you at the I-Bar.
Yeah. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much. Another episode, KC Happy Hour. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. As always, like I said, we'll be tagging everyone that we've had on this show for any of these guys. If you want to learn anything about more of the team operations going on and do anything from training days and coaching days to going and racing with them at major events, all these guys are super hard workers and are happy to take your call, your text, any questions you've got, and help you guide you on your way in this sport, because everyone here, and these guys can tell you too, we're in it because we love it, and we love trying to help new people in, and that passion and seeing someone that shares that passion, it just makes you want to work that much harder to help them. So to Mike Doty, Ryan Perry, Race Liberante, Brandon Jarsikrack, and of course the rest of the crew that we had on here, thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you guys next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, episode 10. That is a wrap.